Okay, ready for a deep dive? We're tackling Saindo Automático today, which translates to breaking free from autopilot. And honestly, the title alone just had me hooked. Like, who doesn't want to shake things up and really take control of their life?
It's so true. This whole idea of breaking free from just going through the motions is something we can all relate to. And Edward Montemor Dias, he really lays out this map for how to do that.
Yeah, a roadmap. I like that. And he doesn't waste any time.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, in that first chapter, Breaking Free from Autopilot, he's like, most of us are basically sleepwalking through life. No sugarcoating there.
It's true. And the way he brings in this idea of inherited values, so interesting. It's like we get these beliefs and behaviors passed down, almost like hand-me-downs from our families, from society, and we accept them without even realizing it.
It's like blindly following someone's GPS, right? You might get to a destination, but is it even where you meant to go?
Exactly. And Dias, he says that questioning those inherited values, those things we just assume are true, that's like the wake-up call. That's what jolts us out of autopilot. He actually tells readers, find one area in your life where you feel stuck, and then start looking for those ingrained behaviors that are driving it.
Okay, so it's about becoming aware of those unconscious patterns, those scripts that are running in the background.
Yes. And speaking of scripts, the next chapter, communication, it's all about how the way we talk to each other, it can either keep us stuck or set us free. He's a huge advocate for honesty, like real, clear communication, but not in a harsh way.
So not just saying whatever pops into your head, but learning how to express what you need and how you feel, but with empathy.
Exactly. He even warns against what he calls toxic honesty. You know, this idea that you have to say every single thing you're thinking, even if it's going to cause harm.
Oh, yeah. Been there.
Yeah.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Being true to yourself, but also realizing that words have power.
For sure. And that whole balancing act, it gets even trickier when we're talking families, which is what he tackles in Family Systems.
Families. The gift that keeps on giving, as they say.
Yeah.
What I thought was really cool about this chapter was how he breaks down these really complex family dynamics into 3 basic laws: belonging, hierarchy, and balance.
Yeah, it's such a good framework. And he doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. Like with belonging, he even talks about how acknowledging family members that are absent, like people who maybe passed away, or even those who are never born, it can be really important to understand our place in the system.
Whoa, that's deep. Even those unseen presences have an impact.
Totally. And then he goes into hierarchy, which it's not about who's in charge or power struggles, but more about understanding the natural order in a family. Parents and children, older and younger siblings, it's like a structure that ideally provides stability.
Right, so it's about understanding your place within that structure, respecting those boundaries, which then hopefully leads to a healthier balance overall, which is his 3rd law.
Exactly. And it's interesting how he connects that idea of balance within a family to the concept of forgiveness. That's the next chapter.
This is one of those chapters that really makes you pause. It's easy to say forgive and forget, but he goes so much deeper than that. He talks about forgiveness as this profound act of self-love.
Yeah, and he even gives this really practical tip for shifting your perspective if you're struggling with forgiveness. He says, ask yourself, what good things, what positive outcomes came out of this experience, even if it was difficult?
Instead of focusing on the pain, you're actively looking for those silver linings, those unexpected gifts.
Exactly. And sometimes those silver linings are hard to find, but they're often there if we're open to seeing them.
That's a good reminder. Okay, so shifting gears a bit. Next chapter, victim mentality. This one really hit home for me.
Oh, it's a tough one because it's so easy to fall into that trap of blaming other people, of seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances.
It's like that saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Yeah.
And Dias, he really challenges us to own our lives, to take responsibility, even when it's hard.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating because he points out that some people, they actually hold on to that victim mentality, even if it's unconsciously.
So it's for some people, identifying as the victim, even if it's negative, it gives them a sense of identity.
Yeah. And so he really emphasizes that breaking free from that, it takes a conscious choice to reclaim your power. He even gives this challenge. He says, next time you feel like a victim, ask yourself, what part did I play in this?
Like holding up a mirror, taking responsibility for your part, even if it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. And that whole idea of taking responsibility for yourself, that's really the basis of self-love, which is what he talks about in the next chapter.
Okay, so I'll admit, when I got to the chapter self-love, I was like, here we go, bubble baths and affirmations. But honestly, Dia surprised me with this one.
Yeah, he goes way deeper. Like, he gets to the heart of what self-love really means.
And I like that he doesn't frame it as this big accomplishment, like you've either arrived at self-love or you haven't. It's more about the daily practice, making choices that nurture your well-being.
Yes. He has this great line. He says, self-love is a result, not a starting point.
I love that. It's about making those small choices day after day that build a life that feels good from the inside out.
Yeah, it's about designing a life you love one choice at a time. And one of those choices, which he gets into in the next chapter, is choosing to be present.
Ah, being present. That's
Yeah.
like the holy grail, right? In this world where we're constantly on the go, being present can feel impossible.
I know, but the way Dai is talking about it, it makes it feel doable. He's not saying you have to like meditate for hours every day. He's just encouraging you to be more aware. Like, notice the little things throughout your day.
So just hitting the pause button on your thoughts and tuning into your senses, even if it's just for a few seconds.
Exactly. And there's this part where he talks about being unfaithful to the present moment, and it's so clever.
Unfaithful. Tell me more about that.
So he says, try this. Next time you catch yourself, like mentally checking out, maybe you're dwelling on the past, maybe you're worrying about the future, imagine that you're being unfaithful to the present moment.
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
Ah.
Because you realize you're giving all your attention to something that's not even real, not happening right now.
Yeah.
Like you're betraying the present moment.
Exactly. And when you put it that way, it makes you want to be a lot more faithful to the now, doesn't it?
You know, thinking about all those thoughts that can pull us away from the present, it makes you wonder how much our past experiences, like especially those childhood experiences, really stick with us. Which takes us to caring for your inner child.
Such an important chapter. It validates that idea that even when we think we're over something, those childhood wounds can still have this hold on us as adults.
Right, like that inner child is still there, carrying all those old hurts and insecurities.
And what I find so interesting is that Dias, he suggests we actually have a conversation with that inner child. Like literally ask that younger version of ourselves what they need, how we can support them.
Huh. Seems counterintuitive, right? Instead of trying to quiet those old voices, we're like leaning in with compassion.
Exactly. Because we're recognizing that those younger versions of ourselves, with all their vulnerabilities, they're still a part of who we are.
It's powerful stuff. So, on to a chapter that I think might resonate with a lot of us, sexuality. It could be a tricky one to talk about, because it's so personal.
Oh, for sure, it is personal. But what I appreciate about how Dias approaches it is he frames sexuality as more than just like the physical act. It's about connecting with your own sensuality, celebrating being in your body.
That's such a good point. We often get so caught up in just the physical aspect,
Yeah.
but he's encouraging a much broader view, one that includes our thoughts, feelings, even our spirituality.
Absolutely. And one of the things he says that really struck me was how those unresolved family dynamics, they can really impact our adult relationships, including our relationship with our own sexuality.
Oh, wow. So you're saying that those early patterns we learn in our families, they can actually show up in our romantic relationships. We're almost repeating those same scripts, even if we don't realize it.
Exactly, which is why all that work he talks about earlier, like understanding our family systems, nurturing that inner child, it's all connected to breaking free from those unhealthy patterns and creating relationships that are more fulfilling, more authentic.
It really is all connected. Speaking of connections, the next chapter, The Language of Disease, really changed how I think about the link between physical health and emotional well-being.
This one was huge for me too. The whole idea that Dias introduces, that illness is our body trying to tell us something, that it's communicating an imbalance, so powerful.
Yeah, it's like our bodies are speaking to us, but we're not always fluent in the language.
Right. Love that analogy. So instead of just masking the symptoms, he says, get curious. What's your body trying to tell you?
So, like, if someone's dealing with chronic headaches, instead of just popping pills, maybe they need to look at what stress or unexpressed emotions are causing them to literally hold tension in their bodies.
Exactly. It's about seeing your body as a partner in your healing journey, not just this thing that breaks down every once in a while.
And speaking of things that can feel like they're breaking down, let's talk about anger. I'll be honest, when I saw the title, Anger is an Energy, I was a little nervous.
I get it. We're pretty much conditioned to see anger as a negative, something to avoid.
Right. But Dias, he reframes anger in a way that feels really empowering. He's not condoning like outbursts or aggression, but he's also not saying we should just bottle it up. It's like there's this third option.
Yes. He's saying, see anger as information. It's energy you can use to make a positive change. He says when you feel anger rising, don't judge it. Just ask, what's this anger trying to tell me? What action can I take?
So instead of letting anger control us, we can channel that energy into actually making a difference. And he tells that great story about the guy who used his anger to get into mysticism, right?
I love that story. Instead of letting anger destroy him, he turned it into this path of self-discovery and found peace.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question, what makes us happy?
Yeah.
Diaz says, the secret to happiness, it's actually pretty simple, and it's backed up by science.
Right. He talks about that famous Harvard study, the one that went on for like 75 years. And they found that close relationships, really meaningful connections, that's the biggest predictor of happiness. Bigger than money, bigger than success.
It's so true, though. Deep down, we all crave connection. It's like we're wired for it.
And when we don't have that, when we prioritize achievement or material things over relationships, it's like we're missing out on one of the most important parts of life.
Absolutely. Okay, this next chapter, Self-Knowledge Without Awakening, I think this one's especially relevant for our listeners.
Definitely. He gets into what it really means to know yourself, to go deeper than those surface level things and connect with your true essence.
He makes a good point about the difference between just knowing things about yourself, like facts and history, versus truly embodying that knowledge. And he says that's where real awakening happens.
Yes, it's like therapy, self-help, spiritual practices, those are all great tools, but they can only take you so far.
So you're saying we can have all the knowledge in the world, but if we're not willing to do the inner work, the real transformation won't happen.
Exactly. It's about bringing that knowledge to life, letting it change you from the inside out.
I love that.
Yeah.
And speaking of interchange, the next chapter dives into physical well-being. What did you think of You Were Born to Be Healthy?
This chapter is such a good reminder that our bodies, they want to be healthy. We don't always have to fight against them. Dias really challenges that idea that we have to force ourselves to be healthy.
So it's about creating a lifestyle that supports our natural ability to thrive, not constantly battling against our own bodies.
Exactly. He even uses this metaphor of holding a hot, prickly stone to show how we sometimes cling to the very things that are hurting us. He says sometimes healing is about letting go of a bad habit, a toxic relationship, even a limiting belief.
Like we're clinging to that hot stone, trying to pretend it doesn't hurt, when the real solution is just to drop it.
Exactly. And that whole idea of letting go, it ties directly into the final chapter, An Infinite Loop. That's where he talks about the patterns that keep us stuck.
It's like we're on that hamster wheel, right? Going through the same motions, but not really getting anywhere.
Totally. And sometimes we're so used to those ruts, those patterns, we don't even see them. Dias does a great job of pulling back the curtain. He shows how those patterns often start in childhood, influenced by our families, our culture, all of it.
And what I found really hopeful was he doesn't just say we're doomed to repeat those patterns forever. He says awareness is the first step to breaking free.
So true. Once you see those unconscious patterns, you can start making different choices. He talks about really examining how your past might be affecting your present. Figure out what negative patterns you've picked up along the way.
It's like, okay, this is the software that's been running in the background, but guess what? You can upgrade to a new operating system.
Yes, you're not just a product of your past. You get to design your future. And one really powerful thing he suggests is revisiting those early experiences, but from an adult perspective now.
So not about blaming our parents or anything, but having compassion for what happened. Maybe even giving that younger version of ourselves the love and support they needed back then.
Exactly. It's about rewriting the story so you can create a happier present.
Wow, we covered so much. From awareness to that inner child work, communication, even happiness.
And it's all connected, isn't it? Like these threads that make up our lives.
Totally. So for our listeners, those of you ready to break free, what's the big takeaway from Saindo Automático?
If I had to pick one thing, it's this. You are not a finished product. You're a work in progress, and you have the power to choose who you become. Remember that. Every day is a chance to write a new chapter.
So well said. That's it for our Deep Talk today. What resonated with you? What will you change starting today? Until next time, keep asking those big questions and keep diving deep.